So we mentioned in the last lecture about the Bronsted law is the main way we're going to discuss acids and bases. So an interesting little one here, we would think, okay, we have some ammonia, NH3, that's in solution with some water. And water we just think of as something that's kind of there, but in this case we see that water is actually losing one of its protons or hydrogens and it's giving it to NH3, ammonia. So in this case, water is actually acting as an acid, and ammonia is actually acting as a base by accepting that proton. So over here, what this is going to become, and this sounds kind of weird, is it becomes what's called a conjugate acid, and OH is very easy to describe. That's considered going to be the conjugate base. So neutralization reactions, when you have something that is an acid, this is acetic acid, mixing with something that's a base, sodium hydroxide, you're going to get two things. One is water, H plus OH is water. The other one is considered to be a salt, not necessarily sodium chloride salt, but a salt that is the result of those other two substances. So here's just that example there. And what are we actually getting out of this whole reaction? That. So when you add a strong acid, a strong base, the other things are simply spectators, and we're not going to see those in the net equation, that ionic equation. You're pretty much just making water. So gas forming reactions, sometimes it's a little bit tricky because when you look through here, they don't give us all the steps there. But actually, one of the products that we produce in this particular reaction was carbonic acid. The same thing you have in like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, whatever. Carbonic acid is H2CO3, but it only exists under high pressure. When you have low pressure, which is for us atmospheric pressure, 1 atm, that substance is going to break down into two new substances, or further breakdown, and you're going to get carbon dioxide and water. So it further goes to completion. And there's other examples of that you can see here with carbonates and bicarbonates. If you get bubbles, typically you're getting carbon dioxide, but not always. Moving along, similar examples. This one here, you get bubbles, but it's sulfur dioxide, and that is one of the precursors to acid rain. So a lot of reactions are within factories and such, they can give off sulfur dioxide, and eventually you can get smog and you get acid rain, and none of that's good. This one here is just thrown in as just give another example. It's not always carbon dioxide, as we said. Typically, a lot of times it is, but not always. Hydrogen sulfide, this stuff here, well, it's kind of nasty. You don't really want to experience it. It just smells really bad. It's rotten eggs. Oxidation reduction, I actually really summed this up. We could go a long ways in this, and we'll spend an entire chapter, I believe it's chapter 19, on oxidation reduction. But for here, we're just going to mention that it's a more complete way of describing in an equation, and it's really the reason why reactions proceed is because of this ability to oxidize or reduce. We have to determine these things experimentally, but basically what we're looking at is this whole Leo says Gur. You may have learned that in your first chemistry class. What that refers to is losing electrons is oxidation, gaining electrons is reduction, and this is what drives a lot of reactions, or one of the things that can drive a reaction. Displacement reactions, this is typically what we call a single replacement reaction, in which you typically are putting a solid into an aqueous solution and seeing some type of a reaction, whether it's bubbles or dissolving, and then you're getting another solid coming out or plating out. There's a variety of different things that we can see there. And you probably did some of that last year, and we'll of course do some of that this year as well. And here's an activity series. I don't recall if you guys did this last year or not, but we will do a lab in here, and I believe it is in chapter 4 on this. Molarity, as far as looking at concentration, We'll do a lab really early in the year on this, but basically what we're looking at is the concentration of a certain amount of material within a volume of a solution or a solvent. So most concentrations we look at in here will be based on molarity. And there's a couple of different ways that we can discuss this, but it'll be best to do it in class. So you can kind of look through here, but again, we'll talk about it more so when we're doing it in class. Looking at dilution here, we're looking at a volume taken from an original and taken up to a new volume. Again, we'll do a couple of different examples of that in class. It's much easier to discuss it there than it is here. A nice formula, we can mention this now, and of course we will do it in class as well, but there's a longer method of determining a concentration in a dilution, and there's an easier way, and this is the easier way, and simply using this formula. So I have a starting concentration and a starting volume, and I'm trying to make a new concentration, so that would be right here. So to determine that, if I say, okay, I want this new concentration not to be 1 molarity, but let's just make it up, 0.37 molarity. Well, if I know what my original volume is, let's just call it 1 liter, I can use this simple formula and solve for the unknown quite easily. And so there's a variety of different examples we can use on that. I'm not going to get into this as far as using the stoichiometry on this. It's a flow chart. You can kind of take a look at it. It just shows you can go a lot of different directions with whatever you're given. Titrations. I believe this is the last one in our presentation here. Titrations is a great tool for chemists. We'll do one or two, try to get them in early on during the school year, and then we'll do several towards the end of the school year. But it's typically, if you know the volume and concentration of a starting substance, and it's going to be in this glass tube here called a burette, we can determine, based upon the volume or mass of substance that we have in here, what the concentration of that substance would be. So it's a really neat exercise, and we'll do a couple of those in class. And that's it. That's the end of the lecture for Chapter 4.